Good morning. So I'm looking creatively at my options at the moment. I've been led to do this by the Spirit, as in all things. And I've understood that I can actually build a veranda at the rear of my house, even though I am worthless. And it is pointless because ultimately, those things aren't important. And I'm going to build a more modest project, and I'm going to call it temporary because everything is. And I'm just going to come out onto the deck that I've built, and I'm not going to cover the entire deck. I'll just cover it. The deck's about 4 meters or 4 yards, I should say, deep, and it is 4 square. But I'll cover half of it, I think. I'll just come out 2 meters, which puts my mind at rest in terms of wind shear, because I'm building a relatively light structure, a light structure than I wanted when I started to look at the project with a more critical eye, and watch YouTube videos the way that we all do, and realize exactly what I was setting out to do, and there was a right way and a wrong way. But by adopting a sort of a midway, semi-permanent approach, I can go back to my original plans and use the timber that I'd already bought and is standing just idle because I needed to replace it all with a heavier gauge. I'm on 3x3s. Those are my bearing members, and a job like this would warrant 4x4s, certainly. Actually, I think bigger would be rather good, but I don't know what the commercial timber available is. It might be a bit too expensive to get a proper piece of construction timber of very large dimensions. I'm not sure what dimensions are sold. So 6x6, half-inch square would be smashing, wouldn't it? Because then you've got a structure which is really solid, because it's just got its weight. I don't know. I'm not an expert on sizing. But the 3x3s were not. I wasn't happy with 3x3s for a 4 meter deep, because it was looking 4 meters and the rest. Veranda, porch roof, lean-to, cantilevered roof, whatever you want to call it. Cantilevered roof is what it would be. Which I was thinking of having 4 meters wide. So that's a very large surface area. And the potential for wind shear is obviously, higher. That you just have to think that there could be one day forces acting upon all your nodes that will exceed their bearing capacity, and the whole show will come crashing down, which isn't obviously something that you want to have to witness. It's embarrassing, apart from being dangerous, and expensive. So I can do that, and that's the way my mind is traveling. I feel as though I'm in a period of convalescence, and whether I'm getting better or not, I don't know. I'm probably getting worse, but it doesn't really matter. But I'm giving myself a bit of a break at the moment because things have been a bit stressful, and so I think the Lord has shown me that I have a project that I can do with my hands and actually get outside, and I'm thinking of making a start. How about that? Whether I'll get round to that or not, I don't know. It's a lovely day here in Britain today. It's sunny after all days on end of torrential rain. So it's a good time to be out and about, and I've got to rake up all the leaves in the garden. And my garden has a sycamore tree overhanging, and it sheds a very large number of big leaves that take ages to rot down. But it's a beautiful tree in the summer, so I'm very loath to do anything with it. I suspect it probably will fall down and kill me at one point. It probably needs a look at. But it stands on land which is adjacent to my garden, so I'm trespassing in a way, to look upon it. But the land in question is derelict. My garden is surrounded on two sides by derelict land, and that's quite nice, really, because it means that there's wild animals in there, and there's no people, because it's so overgrown with brambles and such things. It's really quite impenetrable. There's a few dumped vehicles up there, actually, also, that have been there for 10 years, I suppose, since I've been here anyway, which is 5 years, nearly. So I'm looking into sorcery also, and I proceed with caution, because if people who are listening to me, Christians, might be shocked at such an idea and think that I'm following, Beelzebub, I can assure you that nothing is further from my mind. I pray about these things, and I seek the Spirit of the living God, which is in Jesus Christ and in the Word of God, in all these matters. So, all information that comes to me, I try to filter through the lens of my King, through the edicts and the statutes and the commandments. But perhaps I would say my understanding of those things has become, in my estimation, more intimate. So as I go deeper into the Bible, I seem to see deeper levels to it, and I suppose nobody could really deny it, could they? And so, I've made some suggestions that most people would think are not scriptural, by suggesting that as Christians we don't have to try to be good, and really we shouldn't try to be good. I suppose because a lot of people in the church are trying to be good, I think, and it comes naturally to us. I mean, I do it as well. I'll catch myself trying to be good, and it could be acts of charity or just some conceit that has made itself present in my mind and told me that I should do this or I should do the other. And then there will be other scurrilous acts of which I am ashamed, and they coexist. But really, we have to understand that our life is in the hand of God entirely, from the sunrise to the sunset, and throughout the night, and in the darkest pit, and on the highest mount. Everything is before the eyes of God. So we are ashamed, and we should be ashamed, of course, but that's our condition. We should be ashamed because we stand before perfection. We stand before such majesty and might that it's beyond understanding. And the fact that we feel ashamed means that we kneel. We know that we're not worthy. So, yeah, I've made various suggestions that, we don't need to try. We just need to do the will of God. And that must mean ultimately doing as we please. It's interesting that there's a parallel with the satanic, well-known satanic precept, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I can't remember the name of the fellow who wrote that. Anton LaVey, was it? No, I think it was the other guy. And Aleister Crowley. Excuse me. Just have a drink here. I've made herb tea from all the herbs in the garden, so it might kill me because I suppose someone will be poisonous. I don't know what they are. I do, use a little bit of discretion. So yeah, I do understand more and more that is ultimately the whole of the law, but that's why it's so important that we have the law of God and the law of Jesus Christ inscribed upon the table of our heart, because under those conditions, doing what you will is not the same as doing it if you do not have that reference, that binding spirit. Because anybody who has seen or glimpsed the majesty of the Lord God, you can't, you can try, but your behavior is constrained. And you know it. You know it. You feel it. Our conscience is alive. We have to lay it before the Lord, sooner or later. So, yeah, I just see that as being a constant requirement, a constant daily requirement. But I'm very wary of trying to be good, because the minute you try to achieve something, you've lost the purpose. You see, this is what impeccability is about. If you live in the Spirit, then you can allow your actions to be just driven by the godly Spirit that is within you, and you do them in a way without ever reflecting on what they are. You lose this obsession that we have of self-analyzing, and really a form of egotism, and getting very much involved in our own importance and our own reading of the world. And in doing so, we lose actually sight of the world. And this is the lesson that I'm learning from my study of sorcery, which I conduct carefully. I am of the opinion, I'm coming of the opinion that a sorcerer, as described in Castaneda's books, in the world of Don Juan, this Yaqui Indian, a sorcerer is akin to a biblical prophet. And I'm talking about prophets with agency, in whom the Spirit of God has offered. Well, all prophets have agency, don't they, I suppose? Whether it's the burning bush or the apparent mastery of Elisha, particularly, wasn't it? Elisha and his many miracles, twice as many as his predecessor, 14 miracles of astonishing feats. The powers of sorcery allow these events to occur because they open into a parallel world, and in that parallel world, I believe, is the world in which the Spirit of God moves. They can open our eyes to that. I see it as being the way that the eyes of, again, who was it now? Elisha opened the eyes of his servant, or Elijah, in the city when they were encircled by enemies and seeking his life. And the servant was fearful, and there were hosts encamped around the city. And then the answer is, they that be for us are more than they that be against us. And he opened the servant's eyes, and he saw legions of angels. I mean, just an overwhelming force, I can imagine. That's exactly what sorcery does. It opens that access to that level of sensory perception. And it's not just sensory perception, because those things can be also brought into being. Because a sorcerer is a person of power and has the ability to communicate that power. And depending on how powerful the sorcerer is, how advanced, I suppose, a powerful sorcerer can induce large numbers of people to shift their understanding and their view of reality to see a different and parallel reality. You see, because we think that reality is just one reality, because that's what we perceive with our senses. We observe the world through our senses, and we experience it, and then we classify that as reality. But our senses are corrupted. They're not our God-given senses that we had, even as children. We've been buffeted by the world and emotionally wounded, threatened, made to feel inadequate in many cases. And we have adopted defensive stances and methods of classifying reality that don't do justice in any measure to the full majesty and depth of the world around us, which is as described by the prophet, because there are angels that surround us. We can't perceive directly that spiritual world, and sorcery gives us the access to that, and therefore, having seen it, so the prophet can speak. But will not be followed except by very few, because these things are they're not secret, really. They're open, but there is this fundamental idea that you can't sort of consciously get anybody, spread anything like this. They're quite personal states of mind, I think. Everybody has to follow a particular path, and it's a dangerous path, you see, because when you follow that path, at a certain point you do actually die, in a certain manner of speaking. I would see it as a symbolic death. Because the concealed reality becomes clearer and starts to bring you out of your previously held, constructed view of the world and the people around you. And you find that you've become an outcast in a way. Somebody who can't match anything or fit anything and is constantly gnawing at the edges of any belief system that you encounter, because you see more, you see beyond the surface always, and it's a blessing and a curse. I don't think you need to take mind-altering drugs to achieve these states. And the journey of Don Juan, there is a long period when he is involved in using various medicinal herbs, or I think they call them power plants, which are known hallucinogens, and probably very powerful. And they induce altered states of consciousness. But interestingly, as the series progresses and the teachings advance, Don Juan explains that these were necessary diversions to shift the attention of the apprentice, because once the apprentice had been identified, and this was a young man who was an anthropology student of the University of California, and had gone to study, medicinal herbs in Mexico, I think, or possibly even in Arizona, I'm not sure. Traditional use of medicinal herbs, and had been identified as the acolyte then of a shaman. So he'd presented himself, that power had been at play at the meeting of these two men. He wasn't in training, but he was an outsider, and he'd been chosen to be the apprentice, and he was taught the craft of sorcery and how it was practiced. And the more I read about it, the more it sounds biblical. There's a great deal of lack of self-importance. This is one of the things that's fundamental to the teaching. Our self-importance isolates us from the world. It's not impeccable. It's pure conceit. And our relationship also to intent. When we lay a plan, when we speak a word, when our intent is laid out, that intent really should be dictated by the Spirit. because therein lies the power. So we have to align our intent, our inner spirit with the intent of the one spirit. And of course I would say the spirit that comes through Jesus Christ. But the Don Juan is a Yaqui Indian. He classifies himself at a certain point as a Christian, but he never mentions Jesus Christ as being the one spirit. That's the words are not used. He speaks of the spirit, but he doesn't give it a denomination, as it were. And that's not what the Bible teaches. But he is the product of a people that were overrun by warlike Catholic army who enforced Christianity, sometimes with a certain shedding of blood among the native people, and bound them under the power of Rome, of course. This is the problem with Catholicism. We are fortunate in Britain, certainly, and in European countries, are we not? Because we do have access to Protestant teachings, to ideas that tell you, and maybe the Bible is important, maybe that's where we should start. Whereas, in some very strongly Catholic countries, that it would be quite hard maybe to find any strength in the Protestant movement. I suppose they will arise, I don't suppose there's too many Protestant churches in Vatican City, for example. That would be the last place you would expect to find one. But we're in this era of inclusivity. They should certainly have one, shouldn't they? After all, God bless everybody.